Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Play On podcast. This is the football part of the show. In this part, we'll be looking at the football matches that took place last weekend and having a look ahead to the football matches that will take place next weekend. I have Luke with me again. Luke, how's it going?
Oh, good. How are you, James?
Very good, yeah. So we'll get right into it. The first result that jumps out at me is the massive one. Kerry, 4 goals and 21 points. Galway, 11 points. This one was down in Killarney. Kerry looked very impressive, obviously hurt by last year. What did you make of their performance?
Yeah, I thought that they looked very, very sharp coming out straight away. Like, again, you can kind of contrast it straight away with Galway, who looked really flat. They didn't get a hand on Kerry for the entire game. But yeah, from a Kerry perspective, I thought that it was the perfect start. It sets up next week's game against Dublin quite nicely.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Definitely a few of Kerry's players caught the eye. Don't really need to talk anymore about David Clifford. 3 goals and 6 points. The guy is just ridiculous. We always knew he would be an amazing player after seeing him in that minor final against Derry back in 2017. His third goal was unbelievable. He sent Sean Mulcairn and the goalkeeper Bernard Power flying with the feint of a shot, and then he dragged it back and he slipped it into the net. Brilliant finish. His second goal I really liked as well. Sean O'Shea caught a big high ball in. David Clifford, right place, right time. Sean O'Shea passed it back out to Clifford, and Clifford banged it into the bottom corner. Really good goal by Kerry, and they were moving very fluid. I thought their play was flowing through from defence to attack, particularly their first goal. You know, they turned over Galway and they moved it very quickly through the lines. Sean O'Shea then fisted across the goal to David Clifford. He rose up above Jack Glynn and palmed it into the net. Really good goal. Yeah, Kerry's movement I just thought was really good.
Yeah, I thought that a very interesting that they did was, like, last year you saw a lot of Sean O'Shea moved out to midfield. This year it's kind of the first game, I suppose, it was the exact opposite. O'Shea was in at the full forward full forward line, a lot of direct ball into him, and that the two Cliffords were kind of playing off. So I thought it was an interesting thing, and like maybe if that's a strategy that I suppose that Sean O'Shea is going to be tightly marked, and if he can draw players kind of closer to their own goal when they're tightly marking them, it could be something that offers a lot for Kerry going forward.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I do think that Kerry have been relentlessly looking for this guy to fill out the team, another corner forward. And I think Paudie Clifford, to me, is that man. I think, having seen Tony Brosnan, having seen Tommy Walsh, these guys being tried in there, Paudie Clifford, he looked so at home immediately as soon as he played. His goal was a thing of beauty. Darragh Moynihan was kind of slaloming around, not really going anywhere. Then he hits a quick reverse pass to Paudie Clifford. Paudie Clifford goes through and buries it in the net. He looked like he belonged on that Kerry team, even though he hasn't really been given too much of a shot. And another thing that I noticed is Peter Keane now seems to have set on his team. It's a very familiar Kerry team. It's pretty much the same team that was in the All-Ireland final against Dublin a couple of years ago. Gavin Crowley was back at centre-half back. Brino Bugli was in there. Jason Foley, Tyg Morley at full-back. Shane Ryan was supposed to start in goal. He didn't. He dropped out. Kieran Fitzgibbon came in for him. But David Moran and Jack Barry at midfield. Sean O'Shea, and then, of course, David Clifford. Like, he seems to have settled on what his trademarks are. And then, of course, you have the likes of Stephen O'Brien to come back. I think Kerry look very, very, very good. And if they don't take their eye off the ball and respect each opponent as they come, I think they could be serious contenders to knock Dublin off their perch.
Yeah, I think especially in that forward line, you're seeing there's an awful lot of options there now. You factor in as well Killian Spillane, who had, I think, 4 points the weekend. You've got Moynihan, you've got O'Shea, you've got the two Cliffords now, and that's not even factoring Gainey. So, like, that's, like you're saying, it's going to be very difficult for them to decide on which kind of 6 is going to be the starting ones. But there's so many options for them, and it's just a matter of if they can get through Munster, then I think they can definitely Yeah, they can definitely give Dublin a good game.
Yeah. As for Galway, very disappointing. I think Galway, they're obviously trying to kind of breed young fellas in. Jack Lynn, of course, started at cornerback. He was man of the match in the All Ireland under-20 final last year. He's a very talented player. And of course, they Dylan McHugh at centre half back. He was making his league debut. I just think they've seemed to have lost the feel good factor that they had last year, the momentum that they had last year, that they were this exciting, free flowing team. They played really exciting football. They never got going on the weekend, and yeah, Kerry had their way with them, and I think Galway are in. They're reeling a little bit now, and they're playing against a Roscommon team who are known to, especially under Anthony Cunningham, who are very good at digging in and grinding out a result. And if Galway don't get their heads right, I think Roscommon could turn them over. If Galway are in the right headspace, I think they can pull themselves back. But yeah, they don't have time to play with on this anymore.
Yeah, I just thought they looked pretty naive. Like if there's not many teams that would play Kerry and then would have that their full back line is exposed as Galway had theirs, that no one's sitting back in front, and Clifford like had his way with it. He just had Sean Mulcairn on him, but like Mulcairn on his own had no chance really against them. Like so I thought Galway they were set up pretty poorly for it, and I thought they never gave themselves a chance to even compete in that game really. So like they're coming in against a Roscommon team that were like they had a good enough performance against Dublin, so I think they'll be in big trouble. And then if they can't get a result against Roscommon, then they're in big trouble for going down as well. So like it's important week coming up now for Port Choice.
Yeah. Moving on. Tyrone played Donegal, and this was in Healy Park in Omagh. I predicted that the new manager effect would kind of spur Tyrone on to get a result. They didn't. They lost by 2 points to Donegal. I thought it was a very good game, very open. I wouldn't read into it too much, to be honest. I think Tyrone and Donegal, in my opinion, are the two best teams in Ulster this year. Um, I think they know that they always somehow end up playing each other in the championship, and they know that they will do it again. One thing I did notice, as hard as it is to read things, is as minimum time as Brian Dooher and Fergal Logan have had with Tyrone. I did notice that they were directly kicking the ball into the full forward line, or they were trying to at least. They were trying to hit Conor McKenna with early ball. I think that's great. I think Tyrone, I've always wanted Tyrone to be more adventurous. They've always had brilliant forwards, and we touched on it last week about Conor McKenna, about Cathal McShane, Matty Donnelly, Peter Hart. If we didn't even mention, you've got Dara Canavan, Darren McCurry, Mark Bradley, these electric forwards. And to add another one into the mix, Paul Donaghy made his league debut, finished the game with 10 points. Massive shout out has to go to him. But Donegal pulled through, and they kicked some brilliant points from long range. Niall O'Donnell, Kieran Thompson, and a point from their ever brilliant captain Michael Murphy saw them over the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they'll be delighted actually with how it's gone. Like I know the result didn't go their way and they lost by two in the end, but they played with it for about 30 minutes without Michael O'Neill, and they were down to 14, and they were still very very competitive in that game. And I know that there definitely like as that there was definitely rustiness there. That some of the kick passing was a bit off, but that will be developed, and maybe it'll be too soon this year to be free flowing, but it's positive signs for them. And like I think, yeah, Paul Donaghy coming in with 10 points in his debut is like surpassed everything that they could have expected from him too. I think that's a huge bonus now that him coming in and looking so ready. So yeah, I think it's really positive for Tyrone, and then yeah, obviously for Donegal as well. They had a very strong team out. I thought that is pretty close to the team that will be on the in the first round of championship. So yeah, it's important for them that they got a win to build a bit of momentum.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tyrone definitely did show rustiness. You're right. They hit. Well, Kevin McStay highlighted on the League Sunday show last weekend. he highlighted that Tyrone missed 15 scoring chances. So that could be down to just rustiness. Hopefully for Tyrone's sake, it is just rustiness. Relating Donegal back to Kerry, Declan Bonner, I think, again, is coming towards his favourite team. He seems to like Hugh McFadden partnered with Quayla McGonigal at midfield. He likes a half-forward line with Kieran Thompson, Niall O'Donnell and Michael Langan. He likes Michael Murphy floating about doing his thing. I think the icing on the cake is, can he get the best out of Paddy McBrearty and Jamie Brennan? Because McBrearty hit 1 point in the game on the weekend against Tyrone. Like, he hit out more than just 1 point, but one of his points in particular was spectacular. And I think McBrearty, if he's on his game, I think Donegal truly have one of the most deadly forwards in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the last couple of years he's been unlucky enough with injuries, and they haven't really had him at full strength in a while now. So if they can get him going, like, he is one of the most dangerous corner forwards going. And yeah, so I think Donegal, they're in a good place, but the last couple of years they've been kind of characterized of kind of just coming up short, whether that be in a Super 8 stage or a quarterfinal stage. So this year it's just, they just need to get over the line. They just need to, they need to, with the players that they have available to them, that they just need to put something up to show that they are capable of moving to that next level. And I think that's how Declan Bonner's year will be judged.
That's exactly it. And Donegal don't want this to become a trend. They don't want it to become a trend that in the biggest game of the year they buckle. And I thought they were going to check that last year when they beat Tyrone in the first round and they beat Armagh, and they looked fantastic and they got to the final, and then they just choked against Cavan. And the year before, obviously they lost to Mayo in the Super 8s decided, and the year before that they lost to Tyrone in a massive game. Yeah, I think this year they need to stop the trend. And I think that they definitely have the players to do that. I would put both of these teams down as serious All-Ireland contenders as the year moves on.
Yeah, you'd have to imagine that the two would be the clear favourites for Ulster anyway. And yeah, so I think whoever comes through Ulster, they're gonna have a good old chance there now of competing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Right, so that's part one finished. We've looked at Kerry versus Galway and Tyrone versus Donegal. We'll come back with part two and we'll look at the other two games in Division 1 last weekend, Monaghan versus Armagh and first Dublin versus Roscommon.
Pan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part two of the Play On podcast. In this part, we're going to look at Roscommon versus Dublin and then Monaghan versus Armagh. So the first game, Roscommon against Dublin in Dr. Hyde Park. Very strange game. A lot of talking points, a lot of confusion about the new rules, in my opinion, particularly about the penalty and the sin bin rule. But Dublin got the job done, 1 goal and 22 points to 16 points. Roscommon battled, but Dublin are just that tier above them. That being said, how would you have seen the game, Luke?
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. It's any game where you have 3 penalties, 2 sin bins, I think it completely disrupted the kind of the flow of the game a bit. This is kind of when you're starting to come into problems with sin bins now and stuff. That Roscommon 20 minutes of a game down to 14. I think it had a huge influence on kind of how the game kind of petered out at the end. I don't know. Yeah, I think a lot of people are a bit confused with these rules. I think the Costello, the second penalty, when he's dragged down outside the box, and then before you know it's a penalty and a sin bin, and I don't know. It's this point when you're wondering if that's like too much of a punishment for what that tackle was. I don't know. I'd be curious what you think of that particular incident.
Yeah, no, because what the honest truth was, I would say this, is that in hurling last year, it was a glaring flaw in the game that needed to be changed. there needed to be a stronger punishment for denying an obvious goal scoring opportunity. But I didn't see it as being that bad in football. I didn't see it as needing that much of a change. The obvious one in the hurling was when Niall Burke caught the ball over Hugh Lawler in the Leinster final, and Hugh Lawler just held on to Niall Burke's hurl so that he couldn't score a goal for Galway. But the only example I can really think of last year where an obvious goal scoring opportunity was stopped by a cynical foul was in the Connacht final when Owen McLaughlin came across one of the Galway players in the last minute of the game. He knew he was going to get a black card, but he took it. This year, I don't see the need for this to happen. I don't see the need, especially when it then happens to Roscommon when they're playing against Dublin and they need the breaks to go for them. They need Dublin to lose a man for 20 minutes and to get a penalty, not the other way around. And
I feel like this rule was just brought in because of instances like that, where it's the last minute of the game and a player drags him down, knowing that the 10-minute sin bin isn't going to matter because there's only 30 seconds left in the game. But what's happened now is that any incident that happens early into the game, you're going to have a double whammy of a penalty and this sin bin as well. So I don't know. I think it's got to a stage now where it was a fairly innocuous challenge in Costello. Yeah, he was pulled down, but I thought the punishment was completely disproportionate as to what the actual incident was.
It was even worse for me about the one involving Brian Fenton right at the end. So Brian Fenton gets the ball, he's going right through. He takes a shot for goal. Niall Daly is falling backwards. His foot is in no way endangering Fenton. And the referee gives a penalty again. Nothing Niall Daly can do. He's falling away from the goal. He's not in any way threatening to injure Brian Fenton, which is the purpose of the rule. And again, another penalty was done. Anthony Cunningham has some very strong words after, and rightfully so. I think Roscommon were hard done by. I
completely agree.
We were hard done by. And as well as that, they messed it up themselves. They missed big chances. I'm talking in the first half. Diarmuid Murtagh, I don't know how he missed that goal chance. Cathal Craig fisted it across the goal to him, and Murtagh slapped it against the crossbar of the post.
It was the upper post as well over the bar.
Massive chance. You need to take them against Dublin. And Tomás O'Shea said it as simple as it was in the analysis. He said even when Roscommon were doing well, Dublin were still in front. And that's what Dublin have mastered. They win games without playing particularly well. They won the game by 9 points. Do you really think that they played that well?
No, they didn't have to. They really didn't have to. It was kind of typical Dublin fashion that they get to the stage in the second half and then they can close it out from there.
Well, in the third quarter, they hit 4 points with no reply. And Ross, that stretch in the third quarter that Dublin do, that tends to put teams away. Another massive talking point that Tomás O'Shea had with Kevin McStay was the advanced marks. They were labelling it as a cop-out in the game, and to be honest, I would agree with that. I agree. It was said on the GAA Hour podcast, it was said that for a mark to be deemed worthy, a kick from outside the 45 to inside the 21 is what you would want, because then that has to be a big kick pass. You have to kick it where there's an element that you could lose the ball. Taking it at your feet when it's a kick that, is such a basic pass, and then the whole game gets stopped. I think it kills momentum, and I wouldn't want to see it for the championship personally.
Yeah, I'm completely against all form of mark. Really, I can understand maybe the kick out one, because it was getting to a stage when a player would make a clean catch and then they'd just be swarmed and lose the ball, and you want to reward that skill.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
The advanced mark is it's got to a stage now where the game is there's way too many stoppages in the game, and I think any form of this, adding more stoppages to the game, I don't know. I really think it's making it a worse spectacle, and that anytime a player catches the ball around his midriff and then stops, it usually works out about 30 seconds before he gets the shot off, and it's just killing momentum of the game. So yeah, I'd really hope that like the powers that be kind of see a bit of sense, and maybe we can return back to how it was kind of, because I didn't think it was too broken.
Yeah, I agree with that. Interestingly for Dublin, they seem to be trying out some new players. Tom Lahiff seems to be a good candidate to become a midfield partner with Fenton. I feel like they're trying to make almost a Dennis Bastick-esque player out of him, someone who can come in and just put in a shift in midfield. I think Dublin are at their strongest when they go with Fenton and Brian Howard in midfield, and James McCarthy then back at centre half back. Sean McMahon started in cornerback as well. I think Sean McMahon was looked on a few years ago as, you know, a potential fullback problem solver. If, you know, the myth, in my opinion, about Dublin not being able to handle a high ball being dropped in on them. I've only once seen a high ball actually result in a goal against Dublin. That was Damien Comer in the semi-final in 2018 for Galway. Apart from that, how many teams have just launched balls in on Dublin and resulted in nothing? But again, Cormac Costello, goal and 12 for him. Crazy that Dublin can get away with not starting a player as good as he is in every game. Of course, Dean Rock is to come back, Paul Mannion is to come back, but I would think Costello, for me, play him in the next game against Kerry. The form he's in is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think the problem for Costello is that with the freeze, I think he's always just going to be in direct competition with Dean Rock for that position. I don't think the two of them are going to play in a team together. So that's the thing, is that he just has to perform at a level that's going to outplay Dean Rock, and that just seems impossible. And you'd nearly imagine that he would be guaranteed starter for any other team in the country, but yeah, I don't know. He's consistently had these games early in the season where he's put up these huge tallies, and then he just hasn't kind of got the starts once championship comes around, or he would get them and then he would start to fade off a little bit. Like you look at last year, kind of the scoring tallies start to reduce a bit as the year goes on a little bit. So yeah, he's got a point to prove, I suppose, and he's coming into his prime.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully for his sake, he can keep kicking on and then maybe win a place in that team, kind of.
Yeah. So overall, I don't think we learned too much. Dublin look as good as, you know, as normal as they ever have. And Roscommon, I would still put them down as serious contenders to win the Connacht Championship, especially considering how poor Galway looked. As for the final game in Division 1, Armagh got off to a winning start. To be honest, I would have predicted Armagh to win. Armagh do have a tendency under Kieran McGeeney to target the first league match. They blew Cavan out the gate last year in the first game of Division 2 before the pandemic, and they would have targeted Monaghan as a game that they could win, and they did win. It should have been a home game for Monaghan, but they weren't allowed to play it at home because of breaking the COVID rules. So they didn't have home advantage, and Armagh won by a goal and 16 points to a goal and 12.
Yeah, I thought Armagh played very, very well. They again they're a good strong team out, and after building kind of a nice kind of young group of players there, particularly Rian O'Neill. I thought Rian O'Neill was excellent again.
Yeah,
but
himself and Rory Grugan were huge. They really stepped up. Armagh needed them to step up, and they did. Armagh got a penalty straight away, like literally from the beginning of the game. The play started, which resulted in Armagh getting a penalty. Stephen Campbell tucked it away. Monaghan, to be honest, I would be a little bit worried. They did have some new faces in there. Sean Jones scored a goal. Andrew Woods looked good, particularly Aaron Mulligan was superb. He hit a very good sideline, which caught the eye. I do think Stephen O'Hanlon has massive potential. Conor McCarthy has massive potential. David Garland, of course, who played for DCU, he has massive potential. But you won't get another player like Conor McManus.
Yeah, I really like O'Hanlon. There was a point there in the second half that he hit where he ran pretty much the length of the field and then fisted over the bar. But like, and then you see what he did to Dublin a few years back as well when he came on as a sub.
Yeah,
So there are the players up and running, but I don't know whether Banty's the man to get the best out of them. That's the question ahead of him coming in this year. They've did a pretty disastrous year last year, so they've a lot to prove.
yeah, exactly. They blew a massive lead against Cavan,
Yep,
and
yeah, that was a very disappointing
yeah,
performance by them.
of course, winning start for Kieran McGeaney and Armagh in this division. Kieran Donaghy is in the backroom team with Armagh, so be interesting to see what type of influence he's had. It's been speculated that the basketball work that Jason Sherlock does with Dublin, Kieran Donaghy might do something similar with Armagh. Obviously, he has a massive background in basketball. Kieran Donaghy does. Yeah, I thought Armagh looked very good. Of course, they're without Jamie Clark, which is a huge blow. But if they can get him back and keep gaining experience at the top level, playing Division 1 football, and if they can stay up this year, that's a huge benefit for Armagh.
Exactly, yeah.
All they
And I
need to
think that
do is
result at the weekend.
catch Donegal or Tyrone cold, and they can do it.
Yeah. I think that result of the weekend as well is huge for them. I think they have a great chance of staying up now. So I think it's a brilliant start from McGeaney.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that 100%. Now, moving on to a bit which would be very hard to call. We are going to predict the next round of matches in the Division 1 Allianz Football League. So the first one that we're going to try and predict is obviously Dublin against Kerry in Semple Stadium in Thurles.
Yeah, I think that I can't wait for this one. Like I was watching there this morning. It's 20 years on from the infamous 2001 All Ireland quarter final between Dublin and Kerry. That was in Semple Stadium. That was
Yeah.
one of the classic games, the Mars Fitz game. And you see, I don't know, some of the. I watched it back this morning, and it was one of the great games, and it's so kind of different to the style of football we have now as well. But anyway, it's yeah. So 20 years on, and it's going to be very very difficult to call this one.
Yeah.
Again, Kerry looked very very sharp. They looked excellent, but I don't know, it's just so hard to go against Dublin, isn't it?
It's so hard to go against Dublin, but on this occasion, I think I will go against Dublin. I think Kerry looked so good against against Galway, and Dublin haven't realistically. The last game where I looked at it and thought Dublin might lose this game was the All Ireland final against Kerry. Last year I think was a breeze for them.
Yep.
The Roscommon game was standard. This game, Kerry are going to be ready for this. Obviously, you talked about Peter Keane's comments about his disapproval for Dublin training. And I think one of the biggest ones was, I believe, 2019 in the league. Peter Crowley fisted over the last minute point, gave Kerry the win. And Kerry
Yep.
went mad when they won that game. They
Yeah, that
really
was
celebrated winning that game because it was a
yeah, and I think
statement of
Dublin
intent.
kept that game in
Yeah.
their mind till later in the year.
Yeah, I think it was a statement of intent by Kerry, and Kerry need to keep making statements. They have to keep making people remember just how good they are. And they did that against Galway. And I'm going to back them to just about get over the line because I think Dublin haven't been in a battle in a long time. And I think, I think Kerry might do it.
I think, yeah, if you look at the recent kind of league fixtures between the two teams as well, like you pointed out about the Peter Crowley winner there 2 years ago, last year, the Croke Park, that was a classic in Croke Park where there was the last minute free from Clifford to equalise. So look, it just shows these games are consistently tight, but I think I'm going to go Dublin by a point, maybe.
Okay. The other game in Division 1 South on Sunday at 2:00 in Pearse Stadium, Galway. Galway against Roscommon.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's very, very hard because like based off what we've seen at the weekend, like Galway looks miles off. But these games are always tight between Roscommon and Galway. And yeah, I don't know. I think they'll come back with a point to prove, and I'm gonna go with Galway to edge Roscommon.
I would go with that as well. However, I do think that Roscommon might be in a better headspace because deep down, I feel like Roscommon probably knew that they would be in this situation. I think they knew that they would probably have lost to Dublin. I don't think Galway would have expected to lose to Kerry in the way that they did. So Galway might be a bit shell-shocked. But Pádraig Joyce is an absolute legend over in Galway football, and he will rile them up and say, everyone's writing us off already. So, yeah, I'm going to tip Galway to bounce back and beat Roscommon. The other games in Division 1, Donegal are playing Monaghan in McCool Park.
Yeah, again, I think Donegal looks very ready. I thought they looked fit, and I thought they're not too far off their championship team at the moment. So I'm going to go with them comfortably enough to win at the weekend to get over Monaghan. I think it could be close to 10 points. I thought they looked very, very sharp, and Monaghan struggled a bit against Armagh.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if Monaghan can't beat Armagh, you're not beating Donegal, especially not in Donegal. So I'm going Donegal to make it back-to-back wins. Armagh versus Tyrone in the Athletic Grounds.
Yeah, now this is really interesting as well, because you look at Tyrone playing a bit more expansive football against Armagh, who have consistently under McGeeney played expansive football too. So like it's going to look different to what previous fixtures between the two teams has looked like before. But I thought it was some really positive signs for Tyrone last week. I think the red card was the deciding factor in the result of the weekend. So I'm going to go with them to get their first win in the league.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Armagh had a habit of putting too much into the first game and then not being quite as ready for the second game. And I think they might have been a little bit too focused on the Monaghan game. And I think Tyrone are going to turn them over. Right, so that is our review and preview of the Division 1 football action. In this part, we're going to come back and have a look at the action in the other divisions in the Allianz Football League, which happened the previous weekend.
Pan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Play On podcast. In this part, we're going to take a look at the action that happened in the rest of the divisions of the Allianz Football League. So, the two teams that Luke and myself picked to be promoted from Division 2 back into Division 1 were the teams that got relegated, Meath and Mayo. And they both got off to winning starts last weekend in different fashions. Meath scraped out a 1-point win over their old rivals Westmeath, and Mayo smashed down by 2 goals and 21 points to 1 goal and 11 points. Mayo looked really good. I have to say, particularly, I was very impressed by Tommy Conroy. His goal in the first half was really like a top forwards goal. He really put the head down, went past him and buried it. And he really looked like he wanted to make a statement of intent, because he didn't play well, in my opinion, in last year's All-Ireland final. But he's a very talented footballer. And in the second half, he just burned the down defender that he was on. Ran all the way in and set up the second goal for Ryan O'Donoghue. Him and Mayo looked very promising.
Yeah, completely. I think we might see a few of these results in Division 2. I think last year in Division 1, a lot of the young fellas that were kind of blooded by James Horan, they were only getting their feet kind of in Division 1 last year, and that resulted in the relegation that followed. Like you saw the run that Mayo went on in the All-Ireland last year. So yeah, I think these fellas, they're starting to get settled into the team, and they're starting to look very, very good. Like you look as well, 2 new faces, Enda Hessian and Rory Brickenden coming in for their league debuts.
Yeah, Brickenden somehow was involved in the championship before he was involved in the league.
Yeah. I saw he was in for the first game last year, so it's very promising for them, and they're going to get to keep building this team as well in games that probably won't be as difficult in Division 1. So I think they'll be very confident going to the championship.
Yeah, I agree with that. Still, one thing that frustrated me when I saw the team sheet was Lee Keegan is again listed at cornerback.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't understand. Obviously, James Horan knows a lot more about what's going on in the Mayo camp than we ever will. Lee Keegan might be asking him to play cornerback, but Lee Keegan, 2017, he won Footballer of the Year. No, sorry, 2016 he won Footballer of the Year. He's won 4 All-Stars as a right half-back. He's arguably the most complete right half-back we've seen in the game. He's that good. Why is he not playing in the half-back line? He used to be a direct threat to every team that he'd be playing against. They'd always have to worry about Lee Keegan. When you play him at cornerback, I'd say he's almost more of a liability back there. We saw what Conor O'Callaghan did to him.
Yeah, I think that game is the one that lives in the memory when you think of him as cornerback, and that you nullify his you completely nullify his attacking prowess, and then you just see like what Conor O'Callaghan can do, kind of
exactly
to a player that's not used to being in that position. So I don't know if it's just that maybe because he's got older that there's a fear that he can't cover the same amount of ground, but I don't know. I think if he still can, you'd still like to see Lee Keegan in that position with his trademark kind of runs forward.
Exactly. And Paddy Durkin started at centre halfback. I'm thinking if there's any chance that you can have Paddy Durkin, Lee Keegan, and Owen McLaughlin in the same halfback line.
Yeah, it's some legs in that line.
Why would you not want to do that? It's such a weapon. And I think for Horan, James Horan, he seems to be a brilliant manager and then make a decision which everyone can see as a bad decision before he even does it. The one that sticks out to me, obviously Lee Keegan marking Conor O'Callaghan. You go back to the 2012 All-Ireland final when he put Kevin Kane on Michael Murphy and left them in the penalty box together. I think he's a brilliant manager, but I think he needs to lose whatever he thinks about trying to prove to everyone that Lee Keegan can be a cornerback. I don't doubt that Lee Keegan can be a good cornerback if you give him enough time there. I just think he's such a good halfback. He's such a good halfback. He can put other teams on the back foot. He can do what Paddy Durkin did. He marked Diarmuid Connolly, and his battles with Diarmuid Connolly have lived long in the memory. Diarmuid Connolly, one of the most naturally gifted Gaelic footballers we've ever seen. I think Keegan, for me, if Mayo want to win the All-Ireland, they have to get Lee Keegan back to his best. It's as simple as that for me.
Yep, I think that's very fair. But yeah, overall, I thought perfect start for Mayo, and that they're building a pretty nice team there. And then you'd have to say they should be heavy favourites for Connacht.
Yeah, I would say that. I think they will do back-to-back Connacht titles. As for Down, I wouldn't be too worried. They still have class players: Caleb Doherty, Barry O'Hay, and Caleb Mooney, Kevin McKernan. They're shaping up nicely under Paddy Tally. One game.
I think a lot of teams will get I think a lot of teams are going to have similar scorelines against Mayo in that division.
Yeah. As for Meath, they beat Westmeath by a point. And Westmeath were in charge for a lot of that game. They let it slip in the last 10-15 minutes. Meath clawed them back. And Eamon Wallace, who was back in the Meath panel, kicked the winner. But again, I wouldn't be too pushed on Meath. I don't think they're going to get near Dublin again this year. I think Leinster is already a sure thing.
Yeah, there's nobody seems to be. I know that Kildare had a good result against Cork, but it still looks like the gap is absolutely huge between Dublin and everyone else, unfortunately, in Leinster for the sake of the competition. And yeah, I don't think Meath will be. I don't think Meath are even the second favourites to contest in Leinster.
Well, what happens for me with Meath is they seem to put together a team each year. They seem to put together a new team each year. Like you think back 2019, they had Graham Riley, they had Michael Newman. They were the key forwards for them in 2019, as well as Ben Brennan. Then 2020, none of them are there. Like it's Shane Walsh this time, it's Jordan Morris this time. And then in this game, they're clearly trying to stick with a panel, but I'm thinking Meath don't ever have their best team there. They never have their best 15 lads there. And that seems to be something that I think is holding them back.
Yep, I think so. I think giving the rest of the teams in the division, I still think they have a good chance for top 2 finish, but I wouldn't be hugely optimistic for their season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other 2 games in Division 2, obviously you said it yourself, Kildare had a very noticeable victory over Cork. They won by 4 points, 2 goals and 12 points to 14 points. Of course, Cian O'Neill is involved in the Cork backroom team. Didn't help Cork too much against Kildare. Jack O'Connor, of course, in charge of Kildare. So that's it for me. I think Kildare are going to top that group. I'm liking the project that's going on there. They've found really good forwards in Derek Irwin. Of course, they've Daniel Flynn back in the panel. They've brilliant footballers like Kevin Feely. I'm liking how Kildare are moving.
Yep, that was a huge win for them. I know that the location of the game was changed due to the COVID breach by Cork and stuff, and that was probably a factor in the result as well. But I thought it was a great start for them, and they'll be very, very keen to try and get back up to Division 1. That's where they want to be testing themselves. If they want to close any gap to Dublin, they need to be up playing Division 1 standard teams weekly.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other result in Division 2, Clare beat Laois 1 goal and 16 points to 12 points. Life without Gary Brennan gets off to a winning start for Clare, and they look good.
Yep, I thought they did. I think in particular the score stands out as on Cleary's sideline. I thought it was an outrageous score. So yeah, great start for Clare.
Yeah, they've always had class footballers, Clare, like the likes of Jamie Malone, the likes of Keelan Sexton. Of course, David Clifford famously said that Gordon Kelly was one of the toughest markers he's ever faced. So they've put together a very solid team there. And as for Laois, I think the fact that Laois have now lost to Clare, I can't see them beating Cork or Kildare. It doesn't look great for Laois, to be honest. I think they could be heading down to Division 3.
Yep, I think I'd agree with that.
Okay, moving on to Division 3. The result that jumps out, the fact that jumps out is obviously this must be one of the first times in the Allianz League history that you have 2 provincial champions in Division 3. And both of them lost their opening game. Fermanagh beat Cavan 15 points to 13, and Limerick beat Tipperary 1 goal and 13 points to 14 points.
Yeah, it's. I think it just sums up how weird the championship was last year, and that you just see the 2 teams that were completely unexpected to win their provincial titles. I know that last year Limerick gave Tip a good old contest in Munster, so I don't think it was too much of a surprise to see Limerick overturn them. They're building a nice team down there, especially with Ian Corbett, a centre back. So yeah, I think, and yeah, Fermanagh can be tricky game to go to as well. I don't think either of them were huge surprises. I think it just sums up how much of a surprise last season really was.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Cavan's win over Donegal was more of a shock than Tipperary's win over Cork. I think Cork did Tipperary a favour by getting Kerry out of the way. I think if Kerry had played in those conditions against Tipperary, I don't think Tipperary would have got near Kerry, to be honest.
No.
Of course, yeah, you're right. Limerick nearly beat Tipperary in the Munster Championship. It was Conor Sweeney's unbelievable sideline that kept Tipperary in the championship. And so that's something that everybody was overlooking. Billy Lee is building a really exciting bunch of players down there at Limerick. And I wasn't surprised at all that they won this one. I was more surprised by the Fermanagh Cavan game. I thought Cavan would make a statement. We're Ulster champions. We're not staying down in Division 3. We're going to smoke everyone down here. And yeah, they got beaten. Ryan McMenamin, obviously in charge of Fermanagh. One of the big moments in the game was the James Smith red card. I know James McMahon got sent off after for Fermanagh. But Sean Quigley's back in the Fermanagh camp and he looked good. Good performance from him. And Fermanagh deserving winners in my opinion.
Yep, brilliant. Yeah, I think it definitely kind of it upset our predictions anyway for going up from Division 3. I think that went both those results went against how we thought they would. So yeah, it sets up the rest of the fixtures in that division quite nicely.
Yeah. In the other games in Division 3, Derry beat Longford by 21 points to 5. Very good start for Rory Gallagher's Derry. Terrible start for Longford. Derry, of course, have Conor Glass back playing for them in midfield. Shane McGuigan, of course, had a very good game as well. They've Chrissy McCaig. Derry have a nice crop of players there. Of course, they'd love to have Callum Brown, and they'd love to have players like Anton Tohill, but the AFL came calling. But a good start for Rory Gallagher nonetheless.
Yep, absolutely. I think that very comprehensive win. I think it was a bit of a surprise really how comprehensive it was. I thought Longford have been kind of progressing a little bit lately. So to see the manner of the scoreline, I think it was more so than I thought. And then you look at the other game, the other fixture in it, Offaly with a good win over Wicklow, 4 points in the end. So that I think that summed up a great weekend for Offaly in both codes, both in football and hurling. So it was a great start for them.
Yeah, very good start for them. Wicklow with a rough start to Division 3 life. As for Division 4, the result that stands out immediately is Enda McGinley. The student beats the master. Enda McGinley in his first game in charge of Antrim beats Mickey Hart, his former Tyrone boss, in Mickey Hart's first game as Louth manager. This game was in Dundalk. Antrim pull off a late comeback. Brian Murray striking the last minute point to get a victory for Antrim. What did you make of this game? Or Ryan Murray, sorry.
Yep, all told, I heard that it was a fantastic contest right to the end, kind of. And so, yeah, it was probably the toughest game that Mickey Hart could have had in Division 4. Antrim very unlucky to not go up last year. So I think that, yeah, it was a tough old fixture facing Mickey Hart, and they narrowly came out on the wrong side. But it shows, I think, Louth will be very competitive in this division, and I suppose they hope that they can bring that forward into championship and maybe pull off a few surprises.
Yeah, and definitely Louth have a promising spine of their team. Like, they have players like Daniel Corcoran, who obviously played for DCU. They've Kieran Byrne, who came back from the AFL. They've Andy MacDonald, who's still there, who has so much experience. Of course, he has a direct link to the team that, in my mind, were Leinster champions in 2010. That was ridiculous what happened with the Joe Sheridan goal. And obviously Sam Mulroy, who grabbed headlines last year when he scored all of the scores that Louth got against Longford. He scored 2-2 against Antrim. But Antrim look very good. Again, they have some very good players, the likes of Ryan Murray. Paddy Cunningham is still there. He's back for another season. Paddy McBride, I really rate him as a player. I think he's very good. Or on Eastwood, these guys, they're building a nice little team there, and McGinley in charge. It's an interesting project.
And yeah, and then if you look at kind of the rest of the results in Division 4, Sligo with a good win over Leitrim. Yeah. Carlow beating Waterford, and yeah, so I think it's an interesting start to Division 4, and it sets it up nicely for the remainder of it.
Yeah, the key things that I noticed there: another big score from Carlow, 3 goals and 16 points they put up on Waterford. Neil Carew is definitely more attacking than Turlock O'Brien was.
Carlow rising.
Yeah. And as for Sligo, Tony McEntee in charge. Obviously, he was involved with Mayo. He has a very direct kicking style. And yeah, good start for him in charge of Sligo. So how does this affect what we think our predictions are? I still think Mayo and Meath are going to go up from Division 2. For Division 3 now, I wouldn't be sure. I still think Cavan will go up, but I wouldn't be sure. I think Fermanagh might go up with them now.
Yep, I think it's very hard to call there, and we're basing that off the kind of the initial results.
Yeah, exactly.
I know Derry looked excellent there too. So it's very, very difficult to call, and it's in a division where a lot of teams could just beat each other on any given day, really. So yeah, I think Derry look like they will be going up.
Yeah, well, that's the fixture that stands out from next weekend. On Saturday, Derry are playing Fermanagh in Owenbeg. at 5 o'clock.
Yep, and that will say a lot about where each team is.
Yeah, and it will also be interesting to see if Cavan bounce back. You know, they're playing against Longford in Breffni Park. Cavan need to beat Longford quite comfortably, to be honest. If they don't, I'd actually be very doubtful about if they're going up. Tipperary are playing Wicklow in Semple Stadium. And Offaly are playing Limerick in O'Connor Park. So that's our coverage of the rest of the division in the Allianz League on the results and our preview for what's happening next weekend. Luke, thanks for all your help. And
Always good talk.
we'll see you for the hurling show. Take care.